What is this?
When I got home from my work assignment abroad, my room was empty.
Oh, the useless wife who went on a trip abroad is finally back.
I turned towards the voice that was coming from me. I saw my mother-in-law grinning.
What's going on?
I just cleaned out the trash. I threw out all your things.
I was stunned.
How could you do that?
This is your punishment. You're a housewife, but all you do around. This apartment is mine now. Do you? You have nowhere to go now. Leave immediately.
You don't seem to realize how serious this is.
Disgusted, I ignored my mother's laughter and began dialing a number on the phone.
Hello? Yeah, sorry. Actually, my husband's mother.
As my mother-in-law listened in on my conversation, her face became increasingly blue. She finally seemed to realize how bad she had been.
No way. That much money? Please forgive me.
I smiled and thrust my phone at my mother-in-law.
Here you go. It's time for you to get your punishment.
When my husband Joseph and I got married months ago, we moved into our current home. I work from home. I met Joseph in university. We continued dating after graduation and eventually decided to get married. Joseph is a calm and kind man. Unfortunately, because of that, he indecisive and a bit of a pushover. That didn't bother me before we got, but after getting married, he'd be a bit more serious. Joseph's mother was a very loud person. She's someone who likes flashy thing, a very particular fashion sense. If I were to ever hear her calling my name on the streets. After we moved, my very particular mother-in-law began visiting our home every day. She came up with all sorts of reasons to stay and stayed until it became dark. At first, I tried to convince her to stay by saying things like, "I'm worried about your father," or "if it gets any worse outside," but it never worked.
I work from my laptop at home. I have a lot of work that needs to be done.
You're just lying. All you do is play around on your...
My mother-in-law would laugh at everything I said. To top it all off, she would invite her friend to come over with her to our apartment without permission. She once brought over 5 friends who were all in a great mood.
Look, this apartment is worth $750. It has an amazing view, doesn't it?
She showed off our apartment to all friends as she forced to prepare the end snacks. A few hours later, they finally fin. My mother-in-law left me to clean up, so it was only natural for me to do some shopping and send off her friends. After her friends left, she came back to our apartment.
Oh, that was fun. It's so wonderful having a son. I'm proud of him.
She jumped on the couch. Because of my mother-in-law's constant presence, I could never finish my workday and had to work late into the night to catch up. I was severely sleep deprived. That day was particularly important, and I had been worrying about it all morning. The fact that my mother-in-law forces her friends to come over on such a special day makes me very angry. As I cleaned the kitchen, I cursed my mother-in-law internally, doing this every day. Give me a break. What's this? Isn't even your house. You didn't even offer to pay for everything you and your friends ate just now, leech. Let me do my work. My mother-in-law came into the kitchen to make sure I was cleaning.
Okay, I'm leaving. I plan on inviting another group of next week. See you then,
she said. At that moment, I heard something pouring out everything I had been holding inside my heart.
Hey, do you not realize how rude you are? This isn't your home, yet you come every day. You even brought your friends over show off? Don't you think that's too much? I'm not your maid. How many Times do I have to tell you I'm working? Let me use this opportunity to make. You're bothering me.
I couldn't stop myself. I had to do it. As I spoke, the color of my mother's face began to change. When I finished, she began to scream at me.
Bothering you? You're my son's wife. What's wrong with coming over to my son's house? You're just a housewife who spends her time messing around. You don't even do any housework. You can't talk back to your husband's parents. You're the one who's gone too far. You freeloader. You haven't remembered this?
She left our apartment red-faced and huffing. That night, I told Joseph about what had happened. I desperately asked him for help.
She's old and super stubborn, right? I don't want to be a bad son, so I should just listen to her.
He was totally on his mother's side. This was the first time Joseph had spoken so firmly about something, which surprised his friends. Usually, he was the type of person who would either answer or run away if I tried to ask for advice. This was the first time a conversation had ended like this. I thought he would understand me a bit, so I was very disappointed. From that day on, I stopped trusting Joseph. In the middle of that weird atmosphere, I suddenly got called on a 2-week-long trip abroad. When I told Joseph that I was going to be a doctor, he said I'm not surprised.
Saying that it's work is just an X, right? You're actually just going for fun.
He was suspicious of me. Joseph had never been on a business trip before, so I assumed that was why he didn't understand. Honestly, I was pretty excited for opportunity to work abroad, but I help but think about my mother-in-law. I felt uneasy about what she would the 2 weeks I was going to be away. My business trip ended without any problems and I returned home safely. I was still feeling uneasy, but I felt like I was home and thought about how Joe's must have been lonely while I was away. I told Joseph that I would be coming back soon. I rang from the first floor of the building. There was no reply. I rang again, but the apartment entrance still didn't operate.
That's weird.
With no other choice, I dragged my luggage up through our apartment building by myself. When I got to our apartment, I tried unlocking the door, but the chain lock was still in place.
He's here. Is he asleep?
Through the crack in the door, I call Joseph to wake up. I rang the doorbell again. Finally, I heard footsteps inside, but it wasn't Joseph. She stood at the doorway and began to speak.
What are you doing in my apartment?
I hadn't even entered my home yet and already had to deal with this.
What kind of joke is that? Please open the door.
You're the one who seems to be joking.
Please give me a break.
I was drowsy from the jet lag and wanted to sleep as soon as possible.
Don't you know? This apartment is your name now, so I won't let you in.
My mother-in-law spoke with a triumphant look on her face. I had no idea what she was saying.
Excuse me, what do you mean?
Do you really think you can do this?
She wouldn't listen to me at all.
You're just a housewife, but you let my son go on a 2-week-long vacation without me. Now I'm kicking you out.
Have I not told you both that I'm going to work?
She still wouldn't let me into that.
Give up. None of your things are here anymore.
She threw me a key to a storage facility, shut the door. Stunned, I tried to call Joseph, but wouldn't pick up. I needed to rest, so I dragged my suitcase with me and went to the closest hotel. As I laid on my hotel bed, I could myself fill with anger. I made a The next day, that morning, I headed back to my apartment building and rang from the entrance. Yes, I heard my mother-in-law calling me on the monitor. Without saying a word, I entered the apartment building. Climbing up to my apartment, I unlocked the door and spoke into the apartment.
Please undo the chain lock.
When my mother-in-law realized it, she yelled at me to go away.
Please let me in. If you don't undo the chain, I will you to the police and make a huge. Is that okay with you? Imagine how embarrassing it would be if your neighbors saw that.
My mother-in-law responded to my text and unlocked the chain lock. The inside of our apartment had completely changed in the last 2 weeks. Where did she even find those tasteless cushions and gaudy curtains? In the center of the living room, the red carpet was so bright it made me wince. My head ached from the glare. My mother-in-law was sulking, so I asked her about the rights to the apartment.
Did you really change the apartment name?
I did. I'm sure someone like you would consider ridiculously long and difficult process. But I am different from you.
She had a proud look on her face.
Really? It's not easy to do, huh? Where did you do it? Can you show me the documents? You should have a copyright.
I asked her because I knew she had something.
I didn't do it. My clever son did it for me.
So this time, she planned on bringing in Joseph.
Really? Then let me ask Joseph about it.
I walked towards the bedroom.
Don't go around the house without my permission.
My mother-in-law screamed, but I didn't. Joseph slept all day during the week. I knew he'd be in our bedroom. I opened the bedroom door without knocking and saw him across the face. I pulled Joseph and his mother to S table. Joseph looked down guiltily while he was boiling with anger. I asked him if I had the right to the apartment again.
I heard you gave the rights to your mother. How did you do that?
Joseph's eyes filled with tears.
My mom kept pushing me, saying that this apartment was perfect.
He replied in a muffled voice.
She wanted it, so you just gave it? Isn't that strange? How did you do that?
My mother-in-law chimed in.
What's wrong with my son giving me an apple as a present? All that matters is he did the paperwork.
She laughed, satisfied with herself. I gave Joseph a cold glare and began speaking to someone on speakerphone.
What are you doing?
My mother-in-law said in an annoyed tone. I'm not going to be your maid. The call was connected.
I'm sitting with the two of them. I leave it to you.
Joseph slumped his shoulders even more at it.
Got it? Let me explain. I understand that you are occupying property. If you intend to stay, you will have to pay $8,000 monthly rent. You have 3 choices. You can pay the $8,000 rent, leave the apartment, or if you stay in the app without paying the rent, I will press charges for forgery and breaking and entering.
My mother-in-law's face went pale. The actual owner of this apartment is her sister. Right as Joseph and I got married, was sent to work abroad, so she let in her apartment. Since we were taking care of her apartment while she was away, she let us live in it for free.
Thanks, sis. I'll take it from here.
Get it together. If anything comes me,
I laughed and hung up the phone. I turned to Joseph.
What you did was illegal. Why don't you explain everything to us?
At last, Joseph conceded and began.
My mom kept on pushing me to give her an apartment. Annoyed, I just answered, yeah, you misunderstood. And she went so far that I couldn't follow.
My mother-in-law was in a state of shock. Her whole body shook. Joseph continued to make up excuses.
I feel bad, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea to use this method. I thought if I asked your sister if she could let me take care of the apartment, that would sort everything out.
My mother-in-law finally understood what was happening.
I won't leave. No way. I refuse.
She began throwing a temper tantrum. She was a small child. I pulled out the final card up my S.
Does Joseph's father know about this?
My mother-in-law froze. Her tears and temper were obviously an act. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Nice timing. It was my father-in-law. Last night, after calling my sister, actually also called my father-in-law. It turned out that my mother-in-law had left her home because her husband wanted to divorce her. The reason she had holed herself up in her apartment was because she demanded a divorce. Being in their home was tough on her, so she spent as much time as possible in her apartment. The four of us sat down together and talked.
I'm sick and tired of you. Let's discuss this later.
Didn't I tell you I didn't want to?
This wasn't going anywhere, so I decided to encourage my father-in-law. I pulled out my phone and showed my mother-in-law the photo. It was a photo I took around a month ago when I happened to go to a spa and saw my mother-in-law with another man. She was far away from me, but I immediately recognized her from her horrible face sense. With this piece of evidence against, couldn't run away anymore. After accepting the divorce, she turned to Joseph.
Joseph, I will take care of you, so stay with you, right?
She tried to convince him. Joseph was so shocked to see the Pharisee mother with another man that he didn't even notice she was talking to him, was overcome by how selfish she.
Joseph doesn't have a job or a house, so he goes out every day to look for work. You really know nothing about your son, even though you're here all day.
My mother-in-law trembled with fear and shock.
You're also jobless. Don't make fun of my son.
Helene, then let me surprise you with something. I can't give you all the details about the job, but I am a shadow writer. I make over $75,000 a year. You assume that I spend all day playing around, but I make a lot of money.
Since I work as a ghostwriter, my work is very confidential.
You hid this from me. No way.
My mother-in-law finally accepted that she couldn't fight back. After all this, I had lost my trust, so I told him I wanted a divorce. He and his mother-in-law moved out of an apartment. After they left, Joseph begged me to another chance, but I refused. Joseph had no choice but to agree to divorce, so our marriage came to an only 6 months. We had no property to divide or anything. Joseph just had to leave. Around the same time, Joseph's parents officialized their divorce. Getting divorced really invigorated my ex-father-in-law, and now he has a daily celebration. Joseph and his mother were both unemployed, so they couldn't rent a new apartment. They had to rely on some relatives to let them stay in a real, rundown apartment they owned. I made sure to claim rent and utilities from my ex-mother-in-law for the 2 weeks she stayed in the apartment while I was away. Joseph's father also claimed money from her. In order to pay everything off, Josie and his mother began desperately working part-time jobs. My ex-mother-in-law can no longer afford flashy clothing, so I'm sure I want to be able to recognize her from afar. Though I had caused my sister trouble, she just laughed and joked that I should take better care of her apartment. From this experience, I relearned that only becomes meaningful when you put in your own effort to obtain it.